You're back. Sorry for that short technical hitch. Now, Josh, just before we went on break, I'll put to you this question that, well, it seems even as we talk about the president calling for an audit and also a look into the activities of the directors of the various factories in the country, the question really is on price control. And they're saying, well, you can't control the price. And let me put this to you as well this morning. Well, they're saying, well, sometimes they can price it in the favor of the farmer. Case in point, this morning we do have news that if you are a KTDA farmer in the Mount Kenya region, especially Murang'a, Embu, Meru, and Kirinyaga counties, as opposed to receiving 16 shillings per kilo, you're receiving 21 shillings per kilo. So, going to say that sometimes it might be in the favor of the farmer as opposed to saying, well, you can't control the prices. Do they have a point on that? And do you see that this is where the contagion is as opposed to the whole process of the activities of KTDA?
I think I'm glad you mentioned the new price announcement for farmers in the east of Rift. I think that was announced yesterday, if I'm not wrong.
Yes.
But then again, that was KTDA acting in response to a directive by Peter Munya, the CS Agriculture. So again, as I was saying, the issue is what is the level of transparency in the manner in which KTDA sets prices, then definitely corruption thrives. So at the end of the day, that for KTDA, but it boils down to show me yours and I'll show you mine. Because if they're not sure how they are setting their prices, then we can't really trust them and say, by good faith, we assume that you're working in the best interest of the farmer. Clearly, the farmer is suffering. Clearly, the farmer is complaining. So there is a problem somewhere.
Pretty much. Chacha, let me bring you in as well. Price control, do you believe or do you think that this is where the conversation is, even as we try and audit all the factories in the country just to know exactly what they do with the monies of tea earnings in the country?
Yes, the issue of price control is actually the battleground area.
Yes.
Because this one directly touches on the small-scale tea grower, okay, whose interest now should be considered very highly. Because if we don't protect the interests now of that hard-working tea farmer, then where are we going to get this tea from? So this price control, as we have said, KTDA has not been doing it in a very open manner. So it has been rather opaque in the way that you do not know exactly how much do they sell at the auction market, how much they sell, and do they get the best. And this is where now corruption has now crippled this sector. This is where we are having other cartels who have infiltrated the tea sector to the point that now cartels exist, actually, as I've said, right from the center to the factories, to the management of the board, and actually right to the auctioning of the tea, the finished. So when you look at that, you need to find a way of doing away with the cartels, other middlemen who are not known even by the government. If we are having KTDA actually that is responsible for the marketing, then it should do its marketing activities in a very open manner. The government is coming now to safeguard the farmer because KTDA is exploiting the farmer, who needs to be paid much so that we don't lose the small-scale tea farmers. In fact, it is actually in some parts of Nyanza, we have small-scale tea growers in Nyamira, Kisii. That is, they are getting 15 shillings per kilo.
Yes.
And in fact, when they take it to the tea buying center, that is the clerk and the whatnot, there are people there now who even the weighing scales are tampered with, in that the farmer does not get the tea leaves weighed properly. You see, the farmer loses right at the buying center, up to the point of the selling, the pricing. You see, that is not very, we need to streamline the operations of the entire sector up to the grassroots, because we have a big problem facing the small-scale tea growers. Thank you, Simba.
All right, Reginald, clear for us this conversation this morning. Price control has to come down to that. Then why don't we address it immediately and say, well, as opposed to calling for an audit into KTDA's factory activities, that, well, we wait for the government to set what the price per kilo is for all the farmers in the country.
Control is normally a very dangerous affair.
Yes.
In any sector of the economy, and price control stifles a lot of things. One is stifles competition, and also stifles innovation and growth. And if you're going to do price control, you don't just do price control of the selling price, then you also need to control the price of the inputs that the farmers need to do, the price of labor on the farms, because then you cannot set being determined by market forces. But you wonder what competition authority is doing, because they are the body mandated to sort out this monopolistic. The competition authority should do more to. And you've seen it also, there's a bill in Parliament now for Safaricom, the same thing. And you start wondering, what is the purpose of competition authority if they're not, which they are doing, they're operating how they want and not benefiting everyone. So news, instead of trying to audit KDTA and stuff like that, break it up. Break up the marketing, the purchasing, the transportation, the whatever, that whole value chain, break it up into 4 or 5 different organizations which don't fall under KTDA. The guy who's buying, the organization charged with buying from the farmer is a different one. The farmer gets their money there. That organization moves it to whoever is transporting to the main auction force. That's a different organization. And KTDA does make sure that it gets more market access for the country. There, you now kill all monopolistic tendencies. And collaboration is another easier way of the government doing it than rushing to do price control.
Pretty much.
I think
yes, Josh, could you have just 45 seconds, if you may, on that as we clear that conversation for KTDA?
Yes, please.
Yes.
I think I'm glad when Reginald mentions the Tea Act in 2020 tries to do to break up some of the operations of KTDA and are you equipping, for example, you're saying that the factory will be responsible for collecting, storing it, and perhaps one of the reasons KTDA that they had suspended include the sections that break up some of its operations.
Yes. All right, let's move on to the next issue this morning. Well, pay-as-you-earn receipts contracted for the very first time in a decade as the labor market reacted to job losses and salary cuts amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Data from the National Treasury indicates that the Kenya Revenue Authority (KRA) collected 152.62 billion in pay-as-you-earn payee taxes between July and December 2020, compared to 205.27 billion a year earlier, representing a 25.65% drop, marking the largest drop in recent history. Now, this coincided with the period the government offered a reduction in a minimum income tax rate, maximum by that end, to 25 from 30% between May and December 2020, and exempted workers earning a monthly pay of up up to 24,000 from taxation. Good. Let's cross over and look at exactly what that composition is there for. And we're going to look at what have been trend in payee revenue. You can actually see that in 2018, 2019, we had that jump as we wait for them to give us the 2019 and 2020 numbers as well. Let's look at income tax trend as well. Same trend all the way from 2017 to 2020. Again, jumping by those numbers that we have for you there in billions as well. Now, if you look at the percentage contribution of total revenue, you can actually see that payee contributes 27%, with VAT leading at 28%. Fine. So where are we coming from? Let's look at what have been our unemployment numbers in a Q3, as well as we look forward to Q4 numbers coming in from the government agency. Now, let's look at that. A long-term unemployment by age in Q3 of 2020, you're going to see the leading cohort there, 20 to 24, again, is the leading. And if you go by definition as well, you're going to see that 20 to 2024, and we're saying by strict definition, is somebody who's looking for work for 4 weeks upwards. That's what we're calling strict definition. Now we're waiting for Q4 numbers in 2020 to see exactly whether we recovered, because we do know we still don't have those numbers to rely on. Reginald, let me bring you in on this morning. What is the outlook for payee as the economy grapples with the effects of the coronavirus pandemic?
The outlook remains either it's going to be flat or to actually be negative. Yes. Because people have lost jobs and those jobs have not been recovered. So, for example, look at the tourism sector, yes, which is still pretty much, as they say, it's operating at 50%, but with the numbers of staff drastically reduced. Look at the banking sector. Britam the other day is doing an exercise to try and get rid of 140, 150 staff. And that has been the trend in the formal sector, where taxes actually do come from in terms of PAYE. Those have drastically reduced. So either people have lost jobs or people are on pay cuts. So we expect that revenue to actually come in to come in lower. And if you look at then the statistics of our job market in terms of pay, you realize only 3% of the 2-point-something million people in the formal sector get paid above 100,000. The rest are below 100,000, and they are the ones that have been affected the most by what is going on. And the ripple effect that comes from reducing PAYE because of not increasing the employment coverage is that VAT will also start suffering, because VAT is consumption tax. If my disposable income is reduced because I've lost my job, so you'll find a drop in PAYE will also lead to a drop in VAT because of consumption tax. And the main worry is that we are not seeing solutions or policy measures that look at widening the coverage of people, one, in employment, in the form. Once you tax it, you kill it, so to speak. But how do you widen the coverage of all the unemployed people to get jobs actually in a more formal setting or in the formal sector, so that then you widen your tax base? What the government is currently doing is increasing taxes because they've pretty much failed to widen the tax base. So in terms of PAYE, I think it will be flat, tending towards the negative, unless there's a drastic uptick in the economy.
Yes. All right, Chacha, let's cross over and see also the data we're getting from the taxman this morning in terms of the collections in the month of February. Now, Treasury is saying that there has been a 24% increase in collections in the month of February, and they are attributing this to the end of some of the reliefs that we were working under in 2020, as the national government was trying to cushion the economy from this particular effects. Good. Now, let's look at exactly how we performed in terms of a tax performance in 2019 and 2020 and see exactly what were the biggest hits as well. And in that computation, you're going to say that indeed, payee was among those ones that performed decimally at 2%, then, well, since we're talking about pay, we just leave it there. Do you think that when you're looking at it, if you don't consider what has been the unemployment numbers as well, that are also now trying to recover in Q3 and Q4, that you will say, well, even across the board, then pay is going to improve, or you're going to remain with the same sentiment that Reginald has, that, well, it's going to be flat as well?
Okay, thank you, Simba. As you have put it, that well, due to the relaxation of the some of the COVID-19 containment measures, we have seen the taxman increase in revenue collection across the board, be it the pay, the VAT, and others. But this kind of increase does not really meet the target of the taxman, because as we have said, if we are talking of the pay, the is employed, we talk of the loss of jobs.
Yes.
Because now many companies, even many government institutions, in fact, are going on a raft of measures to ensure that they reduce the wage bill. They reduce on the amount of money they pay as in terms of allowances, the amount of money they pay in terms of salaries. So when we have a freeze in terms of employment, a reduction of jobs and the cuts in salaries, then we realize the pay is not going to increase. It only increased from January, February, just because of the removal, the relaxation of the containment measures.
Yes.
Going forward, we are not going to have an increase in more pay, because we are not going to have more people being employed, maybe more allowances being paid to those already employed. So that means our economy is not expanding. It is rather shrinking, meaning that now the taxman, even in terms of VAT collection, may not increase considerably to meet the revenue target, so that we can pay some of the external debts and fund, for example, the recurrent expenditure. So we are looking at a situation whereby the economy is shrinking and the future here looks grim. That means the government needs to actually think outside the box. Look at how do we create an enabling environment to enable maybe the private sector or some of the government sectors that employ, create opportunities for employment.
Yes.
If we don't create opportunities, then whom are you going to tax? You are going to tax the people who are already burdened, who are already reeling under the effect of other taxes. That is, even we talk about the fuel prices, which has a drastic economic impact on the Kenyans. So still, a lot needs to be done. Increasing the tax is not actually the solution. It overburdens the already overburdened taxpayer.
Yes. Josh, quickly at that, if you may, do you also predict, just like Chacha is predicting, that, well, this increase that we're talking about here is basically just because we went back to the 30% PAYE that we're talking about this morning. But, well, they do not expect to have an increase or for it to rebound to what it's exactly supposed to be going forward because of the loss of jobs within the economy.
Thank you, Chacha. I think my take is a bit interesting. If you're using 2020 as a base year,
yes,
then definitely we are going to see a bump up in terms of collection of pay, because the contraction that we experienced last year, according to these latest statistics, is the first in 15 years. It's the lowest pay KRA has collected in 15 years.
Yes.
So I think when you get rid of the relief, and particularly the payee relief, even if you offset for the loss of jobs, then you're still going to see a positive uptick of payee compared to 2020 as the base year, because I think the payee relief was a significant one, and the argument was if you give people at the bottom of the pyramid payee relief, unlike people at the top of the pyramid, they will spend the tax saving as opposed to saving it, because people at the top of the pyramid, when you give them tax breaks or tax reliefs, they save the money.
Yes.
But people at the bottom spend the money. Now, the reason we didn't see a commensurate increase in VAT collection, for example, from the tax relief is because 2020 was an interesting year. So you have someone who has had a payee relief, but at the same time, now they are going to consume from the informal sector.
Yes.
So an individual who was buying, say, their packet of Jogo maize meal will now go to the local Regorego or Posho mill and buy maize meal from there. Government doesn't collect the 16% from the Regorego. So I think it's interesting. One could argue that if indeed the contraction of the payee is as a result of the relief, then we should have seen an uptick in issues like VAT. But then there are other factors that countenance that. So in my opinion, yes, we'll see an uptick through the year of 2020 if you compare month on month,
yes.
But only because we've gotten rid of the reliefs, not because the economy is growing or any such thing.
Yes. Pretty much, gentlemen. I'd like us to move into the last issue this morning. And Reginald, I'd like to rope you in on this morning. So we have a quick take on that before we close down this morning. Let's look at how we price fuel in the country, because that's what the conversation point is this morning. Everybody already knows that if you went to your pump this morning and were trying to fuel, then you are paying between 107 and 122 this morning, depending on where you are in this country. All right, now let's look at that formula, which if you can actually put it on air now. So at the retail level, the prices of super petrol, kerosene and automotive diesel are a sum of maximum wholesale prices of the products, the allowed maximum retail gross margin, and the delivery rate from the nearest wholesale depot to a retail dispensing site in shillings per litre. Now let's talk about the number of levies therefore that are included in this pricing this morning, because that's what Kenyans would like to know. Number one, we have import declaration fee, we have merchant shipping levy, we have import duty, we have railway development levy, we have petroleum development levy, we have anti-adulteration levy, road maintenance levy, excise tax, and then finally the one at 16%, the VAT. So if we put it all together, they account for more than half of the amount of money that goes into the price of that litre of diesel or petrol that you're getting from your nearest pump. Good. Let's look at what has been the average earnings from petroleum and energy taxes in the country as well. You'll see it has been on an upward trend as well. Same thing for average retail prices for selected petroleum products in the country as well. If you look at it, then you're going to see again we are averaging on an increasing trend. Reginald, begging the question, we do know that us as a country, we have no say in terms of how international prices are factored. We have no say. But is there something that we can do, especially now when we're trying to spur the economy?
Just for a point, Simba, if people are complaining at 122, I don't know what they will be saying in 2-3 months' time. But that lending price is 49. That means that's an order that was done most probably around December, January, yes. That is being delivered now. Fuel prices are in the 60s right now. So whatever is being ordered in February, March is being ordered at 60. So lending price is going to go up by more than 20 shillings in the next 3 to 4 months.
Yes.
So 122 might end up looking like just a drop in the bucket. What can we do in terms of the taxes that we put on fuel? Well, fuel is consumed. It's one of the largest things that are consumed. So when you have a broke government that has been running budget deficits headlessly and over borrowing, they have to look for ways of getting taxes. And the easiest blow is fuel. But administration becomes easy. It's a very easy place to administer tax, to collect the tax efficiently without having to increase the cost of KRA of collecting that tax. So people look at fuel alone, but it is actually a deeper rooted problem, which is that one, we have pursued a capital intensive economic agenda.
Yes.
We've therefore had to borrow. Because of borrowing, we have to repay that borrowing. In repaying that borrowing, the only two things that you can do, either increase taxes or borrow more. Unfortunately, Kenya has decided to make it twins. They're actually doing both, borrowing more and increasing taxes. And when you find yourself in a precarious debt situation and you have to go begging to IMF and World Bank, we all know VAT on fuel is not an invention of the government, but it has been a stress point for IMF for quite a long time. It was supposed to have come in 2 years ago. People made noise. It was reduced to 8% to placate IMF to be able to get money. Now we are right in the strongholds of IMF. And I expect it to hit the proper 16% that they want it to reach. So unfortunately, there's nothing the government can do. The only way of sorting out the tax issue on fuel is the government defaulting on its debt and say, we are not going to pay that, we are cutting taxes, we are cutting your PAYE so that we spare the economy. But in the situation they are in right now, for example, by February, we've paid around 648 billion in debt repayment. We've only collected close to $1 trillion in revenue. That means 65% of whatever we collected went to debt. So they are within a rock and a hard place, and they will definitely look for ways of increasing taxes. Now there's wealth tax that is being muted, there's minimum tax that has come in. Those are all ways of trying to sort out a more deeper-rooted problem that we have, is that one, we have failed to understand the structure of the economy. We have pursued a capital-intensive economic growth instead of a labor-intensive economic growth. Yes. And whoever comes in 2022 has a bomb sitting on them because they will either have to default or continue increasing those taxes going forward.
Yes. All right, Josh, let me bring you in on this, and if you can do it in 1 minute, if you can. We do know that there is a state fuel subsidy that is seated right there in the National House Planning Committee that, well, was again postponed. Is it time they implement it on an emergency basis? Because if we're using a December rating now the demand is high in a global oil. That means that we can actually get more prices going up again. Is it time to implement it on an emergency basis now?
I think the subsidy is interesting, and when you mentioned the formula of getting the total price of fuel,
yes,
their subsidy is part of the formula. So for every liter of fuel you buy, you are paying into that subsidy.
Yes.
And I think, I mean, if we're working with December prices, then maybe they got the fuel, ordered the fuel when we were at about 49 USD for Brent crude. Definitely the next order is going to come in at about 50. EPRA is sitting on about 12 billion in terms of the subsidy. Their excuse is that the regulations are not. Mind you, even as we speak, as the what do you call it? The subsidy is before Parliament.
Yes.
EPRA can simply issue a gazette notice and have that gazetted and begin to implement the subsidy immediately. My suspicion is that the money that has been collected for the subsidy has been expended elsewhere, so it's not available. I'm sorry, I am not particularly optimistic that the subsidy is available.
Yes. All right, Chacha, clear for us the conversation. Quite interesting text from Reginald and Josh this morning on exactly what the government can do, if anything, in the short term, just to cushion us from that 122 shillings and 107 shillings, depending on where you are this month. Do you share the same sentiment? 1 minute if you can, Chacha.
Yeah, thank you. The government here can save the consumer from the increasing, the skyrocketing prices of fuel, because are increasing month after another. So what the government can do, and in fact the president, you have seen, he can even issue an executive order to ensure that now the taxes, as we have learned that for every 1 liter here, landing here in Kenya, okay, it costs 49 shillings for it to reach, for the crude oil to reach, let's say, in Kenya. And the taxes now amount to 57 shillings per liter. When you total that, that takes us to around 160 shillings. So if we can reduce this tax, which is more than the price of, let's say, of the liter of oil we import, then we can have the price significantly reduced. And that can be done through the National Assembly, can put pressure on the executive. The president equally can come into caution.
Yes.
As we have seen, we talked of EPDA, he actually gave an executive order to ensure the conduct of the whatever the managers are investigated. Equally here, even April itself, the Energy and the Petroleum Regulatory Authority needs to be also regulated. I tend to think that they are supposed to protect the consumers, but they are not protecting the consumers here, because the consumer is actually out for his own on his own means of survival. So we can have even April here considering other factors and even add the government to reduce tax, something below. So, and the issue of subsidy, we expected the government also to cushion the consumer through the subsidies. But the worry is the government is too broke because of over borrowing. And if it is too broke, then you may not have even money saved elsewhere that can cushion the consumers. Remember the spillover effect of the fuel prices. It will affect the transport, the prices of actually the fare has increased. Manufacturing industry will increase the prices of goods. The price of electricity will go up. And already the Kenyans are suffering. So we need actually more. We need a proactive measure from the government to save the consumer. Thank you.
Pretty much, gentlemen. Josh, Chacha, Reginald.
Just 10 seconds.
Yes, if you can, 15 seconds or so.
Just a cautionary. Yes, just a cautionary note. Number one, if you ask the government to do anything, just know that the government does not grow money on trees. You'll create a problem elsewhere, or an increase in another tax elsewhere.
Yes.
And secondly, the best way, again, price controls is very dangerous. IPRA, what it's doing is price control. If the government wants to control prices of fuel, invest in national oil. Make sure national oil has coverage around the whole country. Let national oil sell their fuel at 80 shillings. Everyone else will start bringing down their prices, because I'll go to a national oil petrol station and fuel at 80 shillings. That's how you control prices in the market, not by gazette notices and all these things that IPRA are trying to do.
Pretty much. Just on a side note, have you looked at the prices of petrol in Tanzania? This morning is retailing at just 93 shillings. Talk of quite a difference. All right, Reginald, Chacha, and Josh, thank you very much for taking your time off your busy schedules to speak to us here on a Metropole Television. And for everybody watching, it's a good morning. Thank you very much for keeping us company all the way from around a couple of minutes to 7.